But yeah, Ruby, like her, she has her own ambitions inside of the book. And it has nothing to do with her sister. It has nothing to do with, you know, I'm different from the rest of you blacks. Like, she still gets the potion, she still gets this and that. And it's never against her will. Or that I will say Caleb didn't really ever put her in a messed up situation. With it. Like he did. Well, she wasn't in her form when this was kind of messed up. It's something that she found to be degrading that she wasn't going to do in regular life. Ends up having her work. Christina has her, well, William has her working as a maid in the show, which in the book, you know, Caleb never has her doing that, and he asks her and he gives her the opportunity to turn away from it. She does still, you know, take the form of Dale, is that woman's name that used to work for them that ended up getting killed, that racist groundskeeper. That's the only thing I can refer to her as. But like, she takes that opportunity to, while she's in that skin, and even when she does it the first time, it's not like a surprise. She just doesn't remember talking about it because they got drunk and they slept together, which happens in the show. But it's not like she doesn't wake up to the same shock that she does in the show. And she doesn't do things like she went to really go look at the kind of job that she really wanted, which was a real ambition to see the world. Like, even though it may seem like something small now, like she wanted to become a stewardess, because one of the things that she had always dreamt of is that, you know, she had read an article about people climbing Everest and how could you get there. Anyway, of course they were not letting black women be stewardesses at this time, and then, you know, you barely had women working it, but that was the one way for a woman to really see the world, is to become, you know, a stewardess, air hostess, whatever you want to call them, which, I mean, that still holds up today. So that's how you do it. I have on eye patches, they feel good. So yeah, I thought that was easy, but one of the things that the house that they're staying in, like in the show, Caleb never, he's maybe live on mission, but he does not outright lie to her the way that I feel like Christina does, and she has more agency. So, and you know, a lot of things are her own example, and she's not doing anything because, you know, her and Letty's relationship is so contentious in the show, but it's not like that in the book, which I thought was refreshing, because like sometimes it's like she's not, the reason why she's not again, you know, at the house is because it's a haunted house. That's good enough. The reason that, you know, she's not really, she keeps up with Letty, but Letty also doesn't ask her for a bunch of help. Because even when Letty kind of pops up the first time, she ends up on the guide trip with them to go find Montrose, because she just simply wants to go to her brother. Well, she is a person that has crackpot ideas and stuff like that, but she wasn't like in prison or anything like that. That's just, you know, that's just how Letty was. Letty's a dreamer. But we never see that side of Letty either. And she never gets bogged down by, you know, getting pregnant by this guy who's not nice to you, but y'all have this trauma bond. So it's not even like you don't even have time to know if it's love. And it's just like you lose your virginity, and it's horrible. And it's not horrible because it's still consensual, but it was just like, everything is just so based around trauma, generational, current, all that. But that's not the case that I felt like it was in the book. Like there's joy throughout. They, you know, they still hang out, and nobody dies, but they are never out of the woods, which I thought was refreshing. And they were in the closing scene of it, when they do take all the power from Caleb, like they did Christina in the show. You know, he was just like, that was enough punishment, but like Atticus didn't die. He always wanted Atticus's blood for you know, a sacrifice, so she could be immortal. But when they take it, he's like surprised, and then they're like, well, and then he says the thing like, well, you don't know what to do with magic, there's nothing you'll ever do, you'll never be safe. And I like that all the characters start laughing, you know, Hippolyta George, Montrose, Atticus, and Letty, and even Ruby, who's in the body of Dale to help pull off this scheme. Is that they started laughing because they were like, when will we ever say, because we're black in America, it's just like we never forgot about it, but just now you don't have an upper hand in another way with magic. So he does bar all the black people from magic. I like that, you know, when the coup of the Samuel Braithwaite, that's Caleb's dad, you know, and you know, staunchly racist as he is, but they don't have the juice to do any of the spells because unlike Atticus, they are not, Caleb and Samuel are not direct descendants of Titus Braithwaite. They're like a distant cousin. So that is an interesting part too. That's why they can't do it. That's better explained in the book than it is in the show. And it's just like, some things I'm just like, it was a weird narrative choice. The same thing I will circle back to Hippolyta and talk about Hippolyta having agency. She's not like this, oh, woe is me, I just have such a bad time, I have given up everything as a wife and mother. That was a narrative choice that y'all made, because she is a wife and mother. But even at the very beginning of the book, when we finally do end up in Chicago with Atticus, Hippolyta's on a guide trip because George understands that that's part of Hippolyta, that she just needs to kind of be away. She's normally a loner. She, you know, has always had this great mind. She's always been interested in the stars and planets and galaxies and stuff like that. And it's interesting too, they have a son and not a daughter. Which I didn't mind. I like to see young black girls, but it didn't need to be, you know, it's just like she didn't end up being this kind of traumatized person. He does, Horace, as he is in the book, does get cursed again by the Italian police chief that I cannot remember. And the whole thing with the two, I do not want to call them pickaninnies, but it's Bopsy and Topsy, from Uncle Tom's Cabin, that he gets haunted by like some the devil doll, and there's a whole story about that. But it's like those, you never see those little, it reminded me of the original Tales in the Hood, where those little puppets chase the owner that ends up the new owner of this plantation, that they are enchanted by one of the former slaves that live there. That's part of her vengeance for, you know, enslaving her and treating her the way that you do, and her death as a form of, you know, how you used her body. But so it reminded me of that. So the characters called them Niglets, but no, it was like they're like a voodoo doll. I kind of want to say what maybe be the closest comparison to it, that does haunt him, that does track him down, in the same kind of fashion that the two Bopsy and Topsy track down and haunt Dee. In the show, there is no Emmett Till's storyline. I didn't feel, and honestly, I did not miss it from the book. They had enough trauma going on too, and I also didn't miss them going back to Tulsa. That's also not in the book. I didn't mind it in the show, but it's just like, why more black trauma? You know, it's just like we literally saw somebody's grandma get burnt up, like for what? And especially since we had already seen a good rendition of this, or a good playing out of this in Watchmen. That's like the opening sequence of Watchmen, and it's better done in Watchmen as well. And it's still connected to one of the characters, so you don't, it's still tied in, it's still personal for of course, George and Montrose, because they grew up in Tulsa. And it's interesting, even them going back, how it was tied in with the book. He ends up talking to the ghost of the Junior Winthrop, because they're trying to find the books, the spell books, so they can turn whatever it is that the Braith Whites and that lodge wants to do, because they want Atticus. And he sits down with the ghost, the son of the ghost, I won't say Henry Jr., I'll just call him Junior, that it's like he doesn't really realize that he's dead, but he was like, he knows something is wrong, because he wants to eat, but he's never truly hungry. He never ever really feels warm, but he's never really cold. He's like, he's just needed, and what he feeds upon is like memories. And it's interesting that he ends up sitting down with Montrose, and Montrose actually, how we get the tie-in with Tulsa, we find out about his father. His father was not doing what he was doing on the show. Like, again, that goes back to them trauma and all that. But this whole thing about, of course he's a tough guy, and I'm not saying that he didn't get whipped, but he wasn't like beat because he was gay and all that kind of stuff like they did on the show. It was, and Montrose is the youngest. It was like Montrose kind of took it upon himself because he felt like he had to prove that he was worthy to protect their legacy or protect their family, because it actually turns out that George and Montrose are half siblings, but you know how we grow up, they got the same mama. George's dad had died. She married Montrose's father. That's how they had always been brought up. So he's not significantly older than him. But the rest of the kids, the Turners, are not related, and that whole book, it's the Freedman book. Actually, that's how the name came up, because he is George Freedman, and then there's Turner because his dad is Turner. But he feels, so, even though he finds that that's his legacy as well, like the book, the slave narrative that was keeping the tabs, the itemized list on what you owed them due to slavery, and setting us free. So this is when you're gonna pay what you owe, and they keep it in the bank in the one of those boxes. I was like, okay, I'm here for this. But he wants, he tells a tale basically of how his father died. His father did die during the Tulsa massacre, and about this time Montrose is maybe like 7 when all this goes off. It's like I said, he's a stern man, but nothing in the book suggested that he was abusive, at least not in the way that is presented in the show. And he asks, he tells, when all this pops off, when everything that leads up to the Tulsa massacre leads up, which is basically some white girl line in about the elevator operator touching her, which the crime and the punishment don't fit together, but they were already mad during this time, because this whole time, early 20s, and about Black Wall Street, and the whites of the city, who you did not want to have business with the black population, so they started their own, and they, within house and everything still in house, they were still thriving, to the point that obviously they called it Black Wall Street. Everything, it was popping economically, and that was just within there. So they had always been jealous, and then in the 20s, it's a roaring 20s, but this is it's not just before the Depression. It's like 9 years before the Depression. 8, because it actually happened in 1929. And the Tulsa Massacre was in 21. But economic downturn, and you fell in the way, which if you weren't such a biggie, you could be making all the money. That's just how it works. That's still an issue now. That people can't get past their bigotry, and then you could live a much better life if you would recognize that it's not anything to do with race. Everyone kind of wants the same thing, and everyone should be entitled to the same thing. But now I'm gonna get off that soapbox. That's neither here nor there. Okay, So, you know, they already know there's a build-up. They know there's a tension in the air because it kind of, you know, that whole thing with the elevator operator happens. It's like maybe 3 days of that building up. So, and their dad works at a shop, and he left something at the shop. I want to even say it might have been, you know, their book of names, or the slave ledger. The slave receipt, if that's what we want to call it. And he tasked George to go get it because, again, George is older than Montrose. He told Montrose to stay home because, you know, he does not want his 7-year-old, even if he's like 12, he doesn't want him out there because everything is going out. Because by the time this came up, that the white people had started coming in the street, and that the black population had started to defend their homes and their businesses, their community. And of course, you know, being a kid, but he felt sore because Montrose didn't feel right about it, because he felt like, you know, he could be tough. He was gonna show his dad he could be tough, this, that, and the third. So he sneaks out, and of course it's really popping off, and he's recounting how the black population the men are successful in defending at this point in time of the massacre, which, you know, took place over like 3 days, like I said. But then, you know, more people kept coming, and they kept fighting. And then his dad notices that, you know, that Montrose is there, even though, you know, he told him to stay home with his mom. And he, you know, runs to get his son out of harm's way, trying to get him back to the house. And he gets shot. And like, that's the last thing that he remembers. His dad is basically, you know, bleeding to death from these wounds from these terrorists. And, you know, but he has enough strength in him to get Montrose home safely and soundly. And even though he's like a stern man, that's like the one thing that he really remembers of him, that he was putting in so much sacrifice to make sure that his son live. And Montrose and, you know, and George do live, because they're in the current story, and they're like middle-aged men by the time that this story happens. So that was, you know, that's basically, he had to be more than 7. If he's middle-aged and this is 50, well, maybe. Okay, we're not doing math, but it was just, he wasn't a teenager, or at least not old enough of a teen like he is in the show. And it's not this whole thing where somebody like the Jackie Robinson Bat came and saved him and his son, and the way that they had them go back and burn up a grandma. Like, why are we stacking trauma on trauma? That's my thing, and I don't think this comes from a black creator. That is my criticism. What was the reason for trauma on trauma? That's my thing. That's my one takeaway from it. The same thing can be said as well, even when they have like their Goonies-esque adventure, when they come across the 2 spirit person, Yahima. They put her in there, they put them in there just to basically murder them. So what was the reason? That does not happen in the show. And then we do see that is it Inuit? I'm not familiar with what indigenous language that they are speaking, but, and I was like, and that's actually one of my favorite episodes, when they do basically do that Goonie style underneath the museum, this, that, and the third. But it's interesting in the book that the people that end up helping them is actually, you know, their own lodge, their own community, because, you know, George mentions in the show that he is a Freemason. They are Freemasons, him and Montrose, in the book. And if you know anything about Freemasonry versus other Masons, and how they even came around, because they couldn't be a part of the other Masons because blackness again. So, but their community pulls together to help find them, and the thing that kind of keeps them engulfed with all of it is because that this is when Caleb takes, you know, that slave ledger. So the slave receipt. So they and they all, of course, they're all black. We all understand, and that's the one tie from your family, or you know, that's the tie to your family, and it's important. So they all pitch in. I was like, the way that they do it, and these are just, you know, regular, they don't have no special blood of the sons of Adam and this, that, they're just regular black folks helping out their friends, helping out, you know, people in their community, which is what we do, which we've always done historically. So I was like, I would have liked to have seen that as well. It's like, that's the whole thing. Basically, in the gist of it, another thing that was, it didn't bother me. It's like he didn't have to be in here either. Like, William's a real person. William didn't die either. William is a part of, he's one of Caleb's cronies. William is still very much alive. He does help basically stage the coup. So, you know, Caleb can be the new head of the lodge that his father is over. His father still, you know, fits like he is in the show. He's still trash. And he's still, you know, still racist, and he thinks he's better. He overlooks his son. Yeah, I was like, I didn't see the purpose of making Caleb Christina. I was like, why are we focusing on the white women? And you tried to make her sympathetic. I was like, let's not do this. I don't know if the showrunner is a lesbian, and I don't know if her partner is white. That seeps into some people who have interracial relationships, that seeps into their work, and it's just like, but for why? Like, that doesn't need to be there. Like, their story is not your story. I mean, I can give you a couple of examples of people that do that. Like, Kenya Barris is obsessed with talking about a biracial family, even though he is not biracial. His wife that's divorcing him is. So he's like obsessed with biracial children and telling her story. It's like, how many ishes are you gonna have? You know, blackish is fine, but you know, you make sure that everyone else is, you know, very mixed and very light skinned, and we're still on that, you know, mixed-ish. It's still about, you know, them being mixed, and it's just like, okay, but what about it? We still here? You know, I know that was the issue with Birth of a Nation, not the Klan version, but the one that's supposed to be about Nat Turner. And, you know, they had, because Nate, what's his last name? Nate Parker has a, you know, rape allegations and stuff aside, has a white wife, but it was just like they had Nat Turner, you know, famous, I would call him an abolitionist, but famous slave rebellionaire who was like, you know, we're gonna kill everybody. He was doing it biblical style. You know, how when we were doing cleansing, you know, to the people that were not of God, how God was like, you gotta go in and kill everybody and everything. The kids, you gotta kill the wife, you gotta kill the oxes, you gotta kill the cats and the dogs. Everybody got to go, you know. But they had him sparing the white women and the white children. It's like, because you see your wife, and you equally have examples of people that do it very well. Like, I always think of Jordan Peele and doing Us, and I would even, but even with Us, like, Jordan Peele is a complete biracial man who has a white wife, you know, but he still managed to tell a story of a black family. And even we're in the supernatural, unrealistic kind of realm. So here we know. Fantasy. I won't say not unrealistic. Us. Yeah. So it can be done. So I just wonder if that was the case. And then, yeah, it was just some episodes were just kind of like, why are we here? What is the purpose? And I think that black creators are also guilty of this thing that we love to accuse people that are not black of being, and how they're addicted to like trauma porn when it concerns black stories. It's just like, of course, I noticed this now, specifically around this time, you know, since Black History Month, it's gonna be like, you know, celebrating Black stories, and like more than half of them, 75% of the content is some slave movie or something, just something where something terrible happened, where something traumatic happened. Like, yeah, it's not a slave movie, but it's Rosewood. Like, come on. Rosewood is a great film though, but come on. You know, and not even that, something that I wouldn't even say is traumatic per se, but you know, it has a tragic ending. Like Malcolm X. It's a great movie, but and even though we know exactly what happens to Malcolm in the end, you know, but it's not like traumatic. And he went through some traumatic stuff. It's just like, but it's not banking on that it told the full spectrum of a human being, which I do think is kind of a missing, that we're not all, there's happiness and there has to be, you know, joy in being Black. But I know what sells is, you know, trauma. And that seems to be what you put everybody in. It's like, you know, trauma to ridiculousness. And I was like, I love something where nothing essentially happens. I think that's why I like Atlanta, even though like parts of their life are crappy, but like no one's dying. There are comical parts, there are parts that are just like, oh, you know, this, you know, sucks, but that's life. And it's not like no one dies or anything like that. Just like they're just going through life, and it's still entertaining, but it's not just like, you know, cue the Negro spiritual of nobody knows the trouble I've seen. And that's what I feel like we got with the TV version of Lovecraft Country. And I'm just like, but for why? But for why? That's all I wanted to know. But for why? And I'm saying that even though it looks great. The actors did a great job. But yeah, it's just some of the narrative choices then compared to when you read the book. It's just like, but why though? You had the opportunity to do other things. But I was like, and this was not, you know, just on Lovecraft Country. You know, I will turn around and say, you know, our main example of this is Game of Thrones when we're dealing with HBO. Why? What was the reason? Why was this the choice of narrative you had? Well, you have so many things to pick from. It's just like, yeah, you may not like, I'm not gonna like the outcome of everything, but I was just like, you know, the journey is here. Although I will say, and this gives it away from the comparison, this is a complete story and it made sense. I also don't think that it needs to pick back up. That's why I hope that there's like a anthology style, so that we get it can even be the same film, but I just want like new members. It can be the same actors, but if we do the same actors, different story. But although I don't know how that's going to work, because like a few of them, their stars always taken off. You know, Jonathan Majors just got cast in some Marvel movie. He's gonna be the villain. Is it Aquaman? No, I don't know. I don't. Something. He's supposed to be one of them villains. It's a bit cushy thing. And I'm like, yes, good on you. You know, and Journey is always working, and everybody else is always working. Michael K. Williams, keep a job. I always see him in something. You know, my favorite, speaking of HBO, Michael K. Williams, love Miss Chalky White. Yeah. But that's neither here nor there. So it's just like these, and they're all very talented, this, that, and the third. I said the one person, I was like, I don't need to see Christina or the actress that pays her ever again. I'm sure she's a lovely woman, but I'm just like, but why? If we're not gonna do that and the focus is going to be on a white person again. I didn't like the time that was devoted to making her feel like, oh, she has to deal with sexism. Yeah. It's the 50s, girl. Well, even if it wasn't, that's part of the thing. It's like, but you're still just as crappy as your father. And you still want to use your cousin's blood for something that you don't even know is gonna work or not. It's like, oh yeah, you got immortality, but it's like immortality with a loophole. Like, come on, girl. Like, and you spent all this time trying to be like, oh, you know, but the men are mean to her. I was like, but she's still trash. Which, I mean, that could be a commentary on white feminism, but I don't care. Let's talk about the black people. Let's talk about the black people for Black History Month. That's all I'm saying. All right, so those are my thoughts. Favorite episode. Episode 3, where they deal with the haunting of the house. Like, I still want to know more lore about that house. Yeah, because it's just a completely different kind of way it's dealt, even though the neighbors, the racist neighbors do, you know, the house does deal with them. So that was interesting. I liked in my favorite one, and I also liked episode 4, where there's like the Goonie style going journey to the center of the earth to get the answers to the book of names. But I did not like what they did with Yahima. There was no reason to introduce them and then kill them. Terrible, especially when you see what's going on with indigenous women that are being you know, murdered and assaulted at an alarming rate. They have like more than, I want to say, even a rate per population, more so than even like black girls. So I don't like that. I don't like that. I actually liked the episode with Gia, but it's just kind of out of place. It was just like, what was the point of adding her? You had enough. We need to deal more with the characters that we have. Let's keep in that pocket. I want to know more about them. Letty, maybe she has some sort of power too, because it always kind of alluded to, like, the thing with her mom, that their family has some kind of power too. But I didn't like that you just basically like grounded her to being like the girlfriend who gets knocked up to carry on this seed of this, what turns out to be an awful family who have a lot of trauma. One is awful on the white side, because, you know, they out here slave owning and being terrible, and then trying to use, you know, you raped the girl, you got her pregnant, now you trying to use the blood further down to help you gain immortality. Terrible. And then, you know, had to deal with all that trauma with Montrose and all that. The threesome that's never quite explained between George and Montrose and Dora. What was the reason? It's no reason. I didn't even care that George actually is not alive for the bulk of the series, the TV series, but he didn't need to. It was just like for what though? And you made a whole thing about, you know, agency with Hippolyta, but you took her agency away on the TV portion of it. What was the reason? That's all I want to know. And it looks like you killed Atticus. I was like, it made sense for the TV narrative, okay. But it's like it didn't. But what was the reason? It was just like trauma on trauma on trauma, and they have nothing to bond them together. No good times, no happy times. There's a 1 second in the beginning where you think we're gonna have a good time, because we see this loving family between Hippolyta and George and Dee, and we see Atticus coming home, and where he's looking for Montrose. So that's still the gist of it. But there's like a block party. You just see all the beautiful black people having a good time just among themselves. Like, yes, we know everything with the 50s, you know, just being black in America. We know. But it's just like you just thought for maybe a second that this would not be, you know, the main focal point. It's just like, yeah, I got to deal with, like, you know, shoggoths and monsters, and, you know, people wanting to take my blood, and I got to deal with racism too. But, like, the TV version, I would say, even though I would give it like 4 out of 5 stars, lacks joy that the book does. And I find that to be unfortunate. And that is my review. Or that's just my discussion. There could be things to discuss if y'all wanted to. I don't know how to do a live and do all that. That would be interesting. And then y'all may not care because it was quite a while ago, but I had to read the book for myself. I don't know why I do it to myself, because then I'd be like, man, the book is better. I do this all the time. Although you know what I'm not going to read the book of? Bridgerton. I'm good. I was just like, I know everybody in the book is white. That's what I know. But it looks like that's what y'all trying to do with the show anyway. That's neither here nor there. But, you know. And I would even say, you know, another thing, if we're going to talk about, you know, we're still getting in the race, it's a problem with, you know, there's a difference. And this has come up very recently because of someone who is not black talking about being a yellow bone and all that kind of stuff. And you dealing with that there's a difference between, and it would make a difference on show, and that we all know as black Americans, there's a difference between someone being light-skinned and someone being biracial. So the story changes and it's like, and I know that you like, you know, Misha would love to work with Journey because she worked with her on Underground, and Journey is a great actress, but it changes the story from, you know, like the dynamic between Letty and Ruby, which you made that kind of a colorism thing. It wasn't that, or at least that was not the main kind of focus as it was in the show. Like, Ruby is still an object of desire, as is Letty, but it's not like pressed as much. You know, Ruby sleeps with Caleb because that's what she wants to do. It's not like tit for tat. It's not like, oh, no one loves me because I'm so big and black. You know, it's nothing like that. She's an object of desire. Like, he genuinely I think to a certain point, he genuinely likes her. Like, yeah, he's trying to use her, but she's using him too for his body. So whatever, that's fine, because they're grown. But it makes a difference between, like, we have different fathers, and possibly Letty's father is white, because you cast somebody biracial who is visibly biracial versus someone who is just lighter skinned. Like, yes, this could be sisters, because that just happens in families, but you know, here we are. So just some of the narrative choices kind of like threw me, and that is what I will say about Lovecraft Country. I know this is all over the place.